Hey, good morning.
Good morning. I'm trying it with the lights out today because I just hating my face this morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you. We're good. Yeah,
Good.
It's like, yeah, I wasn't sleeping, and I saw the post on debates on the Facebook page about the RDs, and then I saw your post. So, like, oh, hey, I'm awake, so why not? It's 5 a.m.
See, for me, it's 9:38 p.m. Wednesday. So it must be Wednesday for you, just really early.
Yeah, it's about 5:38. Yep.
Okay.
A.m. But like I said, I just sleeping problems lately, so.
I'm having sleeping problems because my wife is out of town for a couple of weeks. And when you've been sleeping beside someone for most of the last 36 years, it feels peculiar not having the body there. So I'm not sleeping fabulously. I guess since this is my proposition, that means I have to start. Well,
yeah. So by the way, this is actually a really interesting topic, I think. So I was really intrigued by this.
Oh, well, thank you. I want to say at the outset, and I think you already know this, but I'm assuming that not everyone has listened to this, who will subsequently listen to this video does. While I'm an atheist, hey, God might exist. And I would be happy if he, she, it, they did. Maybe a little bit happier, actually. It would be sort of cool to be able to believe. But I don't find lots of the arguments very persuasive because I think that they're sort of special pleading. I think that I don't want to use the word sophistry exactly, but I think that sometimes people decide something and then, well, I'm talking confirmation bias. They're looking for arguments to confirm what they already believe. And I think that a lot of the current crop of Christian apologists, William Lane Craig, Ravi Zacharias, et cetera, are scratching that itch very well, but not entirely honestly. And hey, the same can be said for a lot of atheists. There's a lot of sort of half-assed arguments that atheists will make. I have a whole list of them. But the entire Kalam's cosmological argument and some of the things that can be extrapolated from it, I think are sort of insincere. And you're familiar with Kalam's cosmological argument, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I've heard it many times. I forget exactly what it is, but yes.
I couldn't, off the top of my head, I couldn't present it either. Currently, the most popular incarnation would be William Lane Craig's or some derivation thereof. And
I would just say that I forget who it was says that man is a God-obsessed ape. And the question is, why? The apes are not God-obsessed, but man does have like this special place in his heart where a lot of people, like, I was listening to you listen to these conversion stories like Deion Sanders, right? He became a Christian after he won the Super Bowl because people realized that this world just doesn't fulfill something within every human wants a God to exist. And I think you're saying that you feel like you would like there to be a God. And the question is, where does that desire come from? If there is no God, why do we care? Why does 99% of the world believe in some kind of God?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to talk about in our last debate. We'll finish that up eventually, the part 2, where we actually just talk more about these things specifically. But Blaise Pascal had some great comments on.
I love Blaise Pascal, but he sort of that's a big topic. There's some problems with, I might mispronounce this, but Pensies, which is where his most famous, or from whence his most famous argument derives, the wager.
Pascal's wager, and really it is, if you believe that there is no God and you're wrong, you pay the ultimate price. But if you believe there is a God and you're wrong, you've lost nothing. So wager.
And that is entirely logical. The only problem with it is I don't have a switch on the back of my head that I can toggle between belief and disbelief. Belief is something that sort of arises. So while I might prefer to believe or know that X is true instead of Y, it's not a decision that I make, at least most times in my life.
And that's why Pascal says that there are 2 types of wise men, right? The one that believes Christ exists and worships him, and the one who doesn't believe he exists but seeks him out. Something like that.
Right. And I would be happy. Okay. For me, there's a little bit of conflation, too much conflation usually, between the claims of Christianity and, what do you want to say, vanilla theism. I could easily believe in God and have no beliefs whatsoever, or have contrary beliefs regarding, the claims of Christianity. I'll be honest, it irritates me a little bit because 99% of the time, if I get involved in a discussion or an argument with the proponent of intelligent design, they're very careful to establish at the outset that the designer wouldn't necessarily have to be the Christian God. But then 10 minutes into the argument, they've forgotten that disclaimer at the beginning. So if I were having that argument, and I would be happy to have it, I would want to make that clear that Christianity and theism are not synonymous to me.
Right.
But, go ahead. I talked long enough there. Your turn.
Oh, no. I just say yes. I mean, now I listened to Dr. Phil Fernandez debates, and he's done a lot, and he usually debates the existence of God. He's debated the existence of the Christian God, but when he does the existence of God, he's very specific to say that he debates the existence of God. He doesn't want to get into specifically the Christian God in a lot of those debates because many times he will lay that out in the beginning and in their negotiations when they're getting ready to debate, and he just doesn't want to do that because then people will say, oh, they'll get into the Old Testament and they'll get into certain specific passages, and he wants to really stick to the general idea for a 2-hour debate, with an audience and stuff. And we could do, and he's kind of like, we could do that one at another time. But right now I just want to do, and he is very careful about that. He doesn't do the Christian God specifically, even though he does believe you can prove it.
Sure.
But it is preponderance of the evidence. And he's very careful about that as well. So I think he's very wise in his debate tactics.
For me, and this is slightly tangential, argument is the very best way for people to stumble towards truth, which, however you care to define that. The Socratic method, the dialectical method, depending on what you call it. But people don't do it very well. It's hard to do casually. You constantly have to be reminding yourself that you can be wrong, and that you should do it step by step. That's why I actually, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, that's why I actually prefer to argue on paper versus face to face. Because, half the time that I've been in arguments or debates similar to the one that we're having now, I realize at the end of it that it's gotten away from us. On paper, it's harder to get away. It's harder to get distracted by the tangents that arise. And
I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know a lot of these debates. Some of these people are like point. But I like what you're talking about, the Socratic type of method, which or the conversation. I've had a couple with Michael, and I told him he's like the Columbo method. It's Greg Kokel has a book on the Columbo method, which is questions. So,
I haven't
tactics.
Oh, I have tactics. That's actually a fairly decent book. Again, in ways I consider it slightly dishonest, because he's definitely, any argument that I get in, including this one, I'm happy to be wrong at its conclusion. And tactics is very definitely intended to equip maybe fledgling Christian apologist to win versus solely to argue. But that's okay. I mean, he is a Christian apologist. That's his. So for him, it's probably a ministry. This isn't a ministry for me. I'm not trying to convert you to atheism.
Right. And what would be the point, right? I mean, this is kind of a thing that I think in an argument for God is like, why would an atheist argue for that point? You're saying, hey, you believe in something, you're comforted in. I was listening to Stefan. He was answering questions, Stefan Molyneux, and somebody wrote him up. Hey, I'm an atheist. My grandpa is dying. He's got like 2 weeks. He tells me that his belief in God and his eternal security is giving the only comfort he has left. Should I convince him that he's, that atheism and he's just going to die and go into nothingness? It's like, why? Why would you try to convert somebody? Christian has a purpose, right? I'm saying, hey, there is an eternal life or death, eternal death. And, I would like to convert you and convince you that you're going to be much better off if you believe in the afterlife, right?
And I'm experiencing that in a way right now. Inadvertently, I converted my father to atheism. It was never my intention. And I've been an atheist for roughly 30 years. And my dad has been a frequently backsliding Christian for, twice that long. And I don't know when it happened or how it happened, but, one day he confessed to me that he didn't believe in God. And, well, now he's 75 and has kidney cancer. So it's unknown at this point how much longer he'll be alive. And I would sort of prefer, because he asks me every time that we talk whether I have reverted to Christianity. He's sort of hoping that I have so that I can convince him. But I'm not a very good liar.
You just
So,
give him Pascal's wager, right?
well,
Especially if he's running out of time,
unfortunately, we've talked about Pascal's wager in many frequent, or previous conversations. So he already knows my reservations. But yeah, no, I sort of wish that my dad's still believed, and I feel a little responsible for his current disbelief.
Well, it sounds like he was backsliding and looking for an excuse, looking for a reason to drop it altogether, which is unfortunate, I think. But
yeah, I have no idea. It sort of came as a surprise to me. But you asked earlier why people want to believe in God, and it's pretty obvious that they do. I think, my answer for that, after lots of consideration, is that we don't really believe in our own mortality. We don't believe it because we can't entirely. If you're a Kantian, you believe that knowledge ultimately derives from experience, and the one thing that we can't experience is our own personal extinction. Sleep doesn't really even come close. Therefore, I think it's literally impossible to viscerally, emotionally believe that one day that we're not going to exist. We might be able to accept it intellectually, but I don't think that we accept it inside. And that inability, I think, might be the origin, not to simplify it overmuch, but the origin of our beliefs in the afterlife. And the afterlife then has to be justified by other things. And I'm not saying the afterlife doesn't exist, another topic. But that's my own pet theory. But finally, to the subject of our debate.
Yeah, I was going to say. So we'll get into that in a part 2 for the other topic.
Sure. Yeah. So if
let's get into
if God can
infinity.
exist forever, then the universe can exist forever. And I'm not going to butcher the Calum cosmological argument, so I'm not going to quote it. But, basically, I think it states that anything that begins... How does that go?
Anything that has a beginning.
Right. Anything that has a beginning... why
as a beginner, I think it's kind of the basic
that,
one sentence statement.
and that seems intuitive. Intuition really doesn't mean much to me. But again, that's another topic in and of itself. But I find that statement sort of disingenuous. I understand that at least the Western Christian conception of God is the omnipotent, omniscient being who was the creator of all things living outside of time and space. And it might be true, assuming that God or gods exist. However, what if just everything existed forever? And I've read all sorts of objections to that. In Reasonable Faith, William Lane Craig gives an example of a hotel with an infinite number of rooms and tries to explain or tries to prove that infinity can't exist in that sense. Well, I'm not convinced, and I would need to be persuaded that, basically my problem with the claim is twofold. I have no reason to believe that anything exists outside of time and space, or even that phrase makes any sense. So to conjecture a God that exists outside of time and space, I'm not able to do. What does outside of time and space mean? It sort of seems like... Did you ever watch the original Batman TV series?
Yeah. Growing up, I did. I used to watch the...
So Batman, every episode, no matter what villain he confronted, would reach down to his utility belt and unfasten something that would save the day.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a little bit convenient to be able to say, well, everything has to have a beginning except for God, because he lives outside of time and space. It's not a it's not something that I can disprove, because obviously it might be true. But no one has ever been able to explain to me satisfactorily, and nor has anyone even made a sincere attempt, what it actually means to exist outside of time and space. So that's my first point. That's my first question to you. Can you justify the assertion?
So I listened to, I forget who it was, but he talks about, and it might have been William Lane Craig, the idea that time, space, and matter were all created at the same point, same time, because you need them. You need all three of them. This is like chicken or egg, right? You need all three of them. You need time or where would you put space and matter? You need space, or where would you put matter? And you need matter, or there's nothing in space to take up space. And so all three of them had to be created at the same time. I would go into, there's kind of four basic arguments that I had. And so again, you already mentioned them, that God exists outside of time, space, and matter. So he's not subject to the laws of time, space, and matter. And number two is and I think this is probably William Lane Craig's hotel idea, is that infinity doesn't exist in the real world. It only exists in our minds, which actually would be an argument for something existing outside of time, space, and matter. Because if something doesn't exist in the real world, and going back to your Kantian point, that how would we know about it? Because it's not something you can experience. And so it must exist in the mind of an infinite, eternal God, and we are made in his image, and so he could pass these ideas along to us. And infinity cannot exist in the real world. And to push that point, you would have, the set of odd numbers, it's infinite. The set of even numbers is infinite. You add them together, and you get the set of natural numbers. So the set of natural numbers is twice the size of the set of odd numbers, yet they're the same size, right? So infinity equals 2 infinity is doesn't really make any, it doesn't make any sense. It's nonsensical. So they are both infinite, yet the natural numbers are twice as big as odd. So how can you be twice as big and the same size in the same way and at the same time? It violates the laws of non-contradiction. And so taking that idea, if the universe was infinite, which I think was it Carl Sagan or somebody in the 19th century, one famous philosopher said that if God is just there, then the universe is just there, something like that. So but you would have to transgress backwards across time, across an infinite number of points to get to, an infinite. If the universe has always been there, it's infinite, then it would, you would have to transgress across an actual infinite number of points, but that's impossible. And the Big Bang, cosmology, not that I believe in that, but a lot of physicists, and I know they come up with new ideas. But and then key is the 3 laws of energy, of the 3 laws of thermodynamics and energy conversion. Conservation, sorry. And one of them, so energy is never created. There is no new energy being created in a closed system, the universe. And we know that energy is diminishing, right? Usable energy is diminishing. And so if you were to go back in time, you would get to a point to where all energy would be 100% usable. And then you go forward in time, all energy is unusable. And so you would have to go back in time to some point where energy was perfect. That would be like the beginning of the universe. And so I think the 3 laws of thermodynamics are a strong argument as well. So those are kind of the 4 basic arguments, I think, that would prove, at least imply, but I think prove that the universe had a beginning and is not eternal.
Yeah, no, I understand those arguments. I'll give you the reason that for me they don't have any weight. Number one, I don't actually believe that time is a thing. I know that they talk about it as a 4th dimension, etc. And frankly, I think that's sort of a bunch of horse shit. Time is a measurement of change, and that's all that it is. If everything stopped changing, time wouldn't exist. Time is a fiction that it's a convenience for us. If we refer to something as being very old, what we're really saying is that a lot of change has occurred. And I promise an awful lot of change has occurred in my aging body. But I don't believe that it's a thing. Nor do I really care, and I don't know if we've ever had this argument, what cosmologists say about anything. Science, and cosmologists are scientists, come up with hypotheses and then theories that explain things provisionally. It's always provisionally. And in 10 years or 100 years, the answer is usually pretty drastically different than the answer that we have today. And that's a plus. That's why I like science, actually. I'm not saying that scientists are humble or that they don't insist for years past the point in which they legitimately and or honestly should. They don't want to give up their their carefully crafted paradigm. But I don't think that we have any clue how old the universe is, or whether there was a big bang or not. They're not experts in anything that can actually be ascertained. They're theoreticians. You know the word that I intend there. Theoreticians. How do you say that? Only. And great. You know, that's how science advances. I'm all for, you know, like the CERN particle accelerators, etc. But do I believe that any of the theories that they propose have any remote connection to reality? No, I don't even care. Science is useful for me only because it helps us make cooler things. You know, literally, that's why it's important. So I have a computer now that's about 10,000 times, with no exaggeration, faster, with more memory, etc., than the first ones that I bought that operated at under 2 kilohertz, right? You know, now I have machines that are operating in the gigahertz. And I don't care even a little bit that the theories that the scientists at Intel Laboratories and AMD, etc., using their electron microscopes, etc., I don't care if the theories are accurate in a literal sense, but that they have a pragmatic use. In that 10 years from now, assuming that I'm still alive, I'll be able to have an even cooler toy, or advances in medicine, etc. So I find it extremely ignorant, arrogant, naive to for when scientists talk about things as if they're certain, when they're not really certain at all. And that leads me to a whole different topic that I won't embark on right now. Over to you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, scientists are always saying, "Hey, we've come up with this new discovery," and you know, a couple of years later, they say, "Oh, you know, forget about that one. We've come up with a new discovery. This is the way it is. This is a fact." And then, which is why when people say science says, you know, I just like, no, science doesn't say anything. Science is just data, basically, that scientists interpret. And yeah, many times scientists will interpret it as fact when it's really not. And so it does cause I think what should be a lot of problems, and people should never, you know, fully trust what scientists tell them, which is why I always say, like, you get into these all sorts of debates, such as the climate science or something, you know, none of that stuff has come true yet. People are still saying science says, which, you know, people are kind of mock that on Facebook with the science, hashtag science, you know, with whatever, whether it be gender or, well, see, science no longer is valid when it comes to those things. Right. So yeah, science doesn't really say anything. Science is that process of discovery and trying to figure out what is true. And so I like Frank Turek, and he has said that science says nothing, scientists say everything. And there's a lot of bias, confirmation bias. I think in science, there's a lot of confirmation bias, and people read into the data whatever they want it to be, which is why, you know, I'm an economist, and I don't think the scientific method as used in biochemistry or something should apply to economics, because it really is an interpretation from a very biased person, and that's what most people are biased. All people are biased, but you mentioned time, and yeah, I think time is just kind of a measurement. Time is actually, I believe, a function of gravity, right? They talk about, I've at least heard this, that if you have a guy on Earth and you send his twin brother out to the end of the universe and back, I think the guy that goes to the end of the universe and back is going to be like so many years younger than the person on Earth, according to if he goes
theoretically, as I understand it. Yeah.
So, yeah, time's definitely it's a measurement. You could say it doesn't really matter, as you were saying. Although, as we age, time gets more and more important, I guess. And it's a measurement, right? I mean, when you're 5 years old, a year seems like eternity, but when you're 55 years old, a year is like gone like that.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah. So time is a real thing. It is, in some ways, it is relative, but in the same way, it is constant. I mean, 1 year is a constant measure of, I guess, how would you describe time? A distance between one. How would you describe time without using time in the description, right? A distance between one time and the next.
Yeah, it's a problem. I mentioned what I did about time to illustrate why I'm skeptical that it can actually be something that you live outside of, as if it's, because it's sort of thought of as a dimension, as something that almost that has a physicality. And, if I said, and I wanted to be consistent, that I lived outside of time, it would mean that I didn't age. I didn't change. And if I didn't change, and I mean if I literally didn't change, as I understand it scientifically, if anything in the universe was literally unchanging, the universe wouldn't be changing anymore. It's where entropy comes in. The moment that one thing stops, absolutely, it would have sort of a, I'm sure this is entirely imprecise, but it's the only analogy I can come up with. Sort of a domino effect, everything interlocking.
Steady state. Yeah, I mean, so that, I think that's, we're talking about time is change. You go back to some point when everything was perfect or 100% usable energy, and over time that energy diminishes, and eventually it will hit, if there is no God, it will hit some point where all energy is unusable, and that would be that steady state, or what's the scientific term? I think is a steady state or whatever, of where there would be nothing would change. I mean, once you hit that, when energy hits completely unusable state, there is no life on Earth, because what we're doing right now is using energy. We're turning energy into a unusable. You like burn firewood, it turns into heat, and that energy diminishes into space, and it's no longer usable.
Right. You're a pretty good guy there, Nathan.
Nelson.
Nelson. Oh, sorry.
Well, thank you. Same to you. Same to you.
Thank you. It's nice to talk to somebody who holds a very contrary opinion, who's not dogmatic about it. And I've been having this conversation for a very, very long time, and I don't meet very many people, and I'm talking about atheist or Christian or anybody in the middle, who don't get pretty dogmatic. I think I was when I was a pup. I don't know when that stopped, but we still technically have 4 minutes and 45 seconds left. But I don't have anything really to add. Do you have any place else to go with this?
No, just again, we're talking about the eternal universe, and I mean, I could just go back over kind of the basic ideas. I think the law of non-contradiction is a good one for, as far as eternity existing in the real world. And so I guess as far as this though, no, I think we've kind of laid out our ideas anyways.
Okay. I'm not sure. Do I just click on the end debate button? That won't.
Yeah. So if you want to do that, so let me just say thanks for taking this up, though. Nice chatting with you again.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
And then we'll, when do you want to schedule part 2 of the debate that requires a part 2?
Yeah, we could do it this week. Want to do it sometime this week? Like, you want to do it Friday? See, I usually think of you as, what time did you say it was over there? 9:20.
It's 10:19 p.m.
Okay, so I usually think of you as 8 hours behind. It's rather than adding 16. So you're like, but you're the next day. So 8 hours behind, 24 hours ahead is how I think of that.
That works. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to do it in like a Friday morning, because you said you're out of school, right?
This Thursday and Friday, I have to desk warm. I need to make an appearance. I didn't have enough actual days of leave accrued to not have to make a mandatory appearance. I have nothing to do. I'll be working on lesson plans theoretically. So, but all of that's already done
together too. So, just got my email yesterday for the temp job for this semester, building Canvas. I need to be doing all sorts of stuff, but yeah, I'm pretty free. So I was thinking, if you did want to do it Friday morning your time, or like 10 a.m., or what time do you go in?
I need to leave here at about 7:30 in the morning.
Okay.
Why don't we work out the time and sort of message it back and forth?
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. We could do I could do Friday my morning as well whenever you get back. So
okay,
probably not this early, but
I'm usually home at about. But on days that I'm working, I'm usually home by about 5 p.m., which is approximately midnight where you're at. Maybe it's 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. If it's, I don't know. So 5 p.m. is 1700. That's 17 hours. So it would be about midnight for you if it was 5 p.m. for me.
A little late for me, but yeah, we can work this out.
Okay.
So we'll do that over the comments. Okay. Well, hey, God bless.
You too. Have a good
one. Thanks. Cheers.